So this is a recap of our key questions looking at Act 2, Scene 3. And we're focusing on this question in class. How does Iago establish the grounds for his revenge against Othello in the scene? We're thinking of this, when we say establishing the grounds for his revenge, we mean how is he putting in all of the details of his plotting that are going to allow him to manipulate others and secure the revenge against Othello that he is so desperate for. Now, we'll take a look first of all at the A group of questions, 1 to 6. Before we do, we want to be focusing on eventually these 4 themes: Othello's compromised judgment or his weak judgment. The second one, Iago's dissemblance and his manipulative skill. The third one, which is a major subtext to the scene, is the sexual fixation and anxiety that the lines of mainly Iago, but other characters in this scene portray. And then virtue, nobility, and the loss of these abstractions in the scene. Those 4 themes are crucial to an understanding of what goes on. And it's important to take note of the way that they combine together. Iago's dissemblance and manipulative skills are evident in the way he takes advantage of the fascinations of others. So the way that he pretends to be what he isn't and the way he manipulates others are evident in the way that he takes advantage of the fascinations of others with abstractions like nobility and virtue and reputation, which we particularly see from Michael Cassio in this scene, on the surface. And then their obsession with sexuality beneath the surface. Iago dances between the two, understanding how human life operates on both of these levels, on this sort of surface, polite, abstract level, and then on this deep, kind of instinctual, impulsive, and usually sexual level beneath the surface of socially acceptable behaviour. And it uses his understanding of both of these and oscillates between the two in order to dupe Othello and others into misjudgments. He tricks them into misunderstandings of interrelations between people because of these 2 binaries, really. Now, our first question: what is ironic about Othello's confident opening declaration? Well, it's very obvious here, isn't it? Iago is most honest. And again, there is a sort of irony to this. There is an ironic quality to this line in the sense that in this play that is so deeply concerned with cynical realism and idealistic abstraction, Iago is the most honest in the sense of cynical realism. So he is honest in the sense of the cynical realism at times when it suits him. But of all the characters in the text, he is the one who shows the greatest interest in this cynical realism and demonstrates this trait most consistently. But of course, he is the least honest character in the entire play in some respects. And Iago himself might throw this contention back at someone who was to accuse him of dishonesty and say, well, I'm the only one who truly understands the honest qualities of human nature. Everyone else is deceiving themselves into believing that they are better than they really are. And to a certain extent, the play's events prove that he's correct. He is capable of turning Othello into a kind of degenerate, violent, uncivilized human being. And that's where this word honesty is constantly sort of riffed upon throughout the play. It becomes this highly unstable and ambiguous word that deliberately toys with our understanding of what truth and what objective value consists of. Now, the second question concerning these lines, Othello's lines to Desdemona: "Come, my dear love, the purchase made, the fruits are to ensue. The profits yet to come between me and you. Good night," and he exits with her. You know, the question is, what does this financial metaphor reveal about Othello's attitude to his relationship with Desdemona? Well, quite simply, he understands, first of all, the purchase made. He understands their marriage in some way as some sort of financial transaction. He uses this financial metaphor to talk about their marriage. sees it as a purchase. Well, the question is then, what has he bought? Well, he's bought himself the possibility of integration into the social fabric of Venice in a much more deeply knit fashion. But the purchase leads to the fruits that are to ensue. They are yet to be realized. The fruits of this purchase are quite literally, in some respects, Desdemona's virginity. And this brings us quite nicely into a reading of the handkerchief, which will, as we get further through the play such an integral role in driving Othello's suspicion. And the fruits here links directly to the handkerchief, which has emblazoned on it a series of red strawberries that are often read as a metaphor for the stained marital bed sheets that Iago is constantly referring to. So the fruits are to ensue. We can read this as a kind of a sexual metaphor for Othello's taking of Desdemona's virginity and the profits yet to come between me and you. So if we think of this, the fruits being sexuality, the profits are perhaps the reward that Othello will gain from sealing and consummating his marriage through sex, and thereby writing himself into the social fabric of Venice. And he explicitly sees this through a financial extended metaphor that reveals his understanding of perhaps a slightly more cynical vision of their relationship than we would, or that he would like to admit. So we do have this kind of, it brings us back to this issue of honesty. The third question concerns this quite vile exchange in some respects between Iago and Cassio. And the key to understanding this exchange is to realize that Iago is driving this exchange as a fully cynical, deeply realistic and dark reader of human behavior and motive. Cassio comes at this from the angle of a sort of polished, courtly noble who's so concerned with seeming polite and his reputation, as we know, that he fails really to understand the sexual connotations that Iago weaves into this exchange. Cassio says, "Welcome, Iago, we must to the watch." And Iago says, "Not this hour, Lieutenant. 'Tis not yet 10 of the clock. Our general cast us thus early for the love of his Desdemona." Quite simply, Othello has kicked them out early. He's thrown them out and told them to go attend to their godly duties because he wants to go and sleep with his wife for the love of his Desdemona. He then says, "He hath not yet made wanton the night with her, and she is sport for Jove." So immediately we've got this sexual connotation. He has not made wanton the night with her. He has not yet engaged in sex with her. He has not made wanton the night with her. He hasn't sealed his marriage through the act of physical sex. And she is sport for Jove. She is game. She is, excuse me, she is both interested in sex and, a fitting recipient of the sex of Jove, of a Roman god. So she is both promiscuous and a Iago version of divine here. We're talking about a kind of cynical vision of this divinity that characters like Cassio are constantly trying to kind of bestow on her, which is sport for Jove. She is the sex toy of a Roman god. Cassio, of course, misunderstands all this. He's far too polite to understand this. She's a most exquisite lady. He's sticking to his rigid, courtly, starchy approach. And Iago says, "And I'll warrant her full of game." Now, this can mean spirit. She is a spirited individual, but it also has a much more crude sexual connotation of being full of semen. There's a very ghastly kind of sexual image that Iago conjures here Cassio again doesn't understand it. Indeed, he says, so here he's agreeing without knowing, unbeknownst to himself, he's effectively saying that Desdemona is promiscuous and has been filled with semen. She is a most fresh and delicate creature. This is the complete reverse of the image and the words that Iago has just put into his mouth, so to speak. And Iago carries this on. What an eye she has. What a provocative glance that she gives you. Methinks it sounds a parley to a provocation. Now we've got one military signal being used here, kind of a deal that's made in order to come to some sort of agreement. Methinks it sounds a parley. Her glance is like a military signal for sexual provocation, that she is sexually provocative. Cassio again misunderstands. An inviting eye, so he kind of accommodates Iago slightly here. An inviting eye, and yet methinks right modest. This is the complete reverse again of what Iago is suggesting. She is not modest in Iago's vision. And when she speaks, is it not an alarum to love? Again, another military signal that actually here creates a sense of panic that I think actually foreshadows the bell ringing in this scene that Iago deliberately draws attention to, an alarum to love. She is indeed perfection. And this is, again, Cassio's misunderstanding. He's not talking about perfection here, he's talking about sexual promiscuity and sexual provocation. Well, happiness to their sheets. And this is a kind of grim personification of the bed sheets used on the night of marriage that we imagine at this moment in time. Desdemona and Othello are off, consummating their marriage, but it's only to their sheets, not to them as individuals. And this is what I think connects their sexuality to the handkerchief itself. It's quite a common a sort of ritual in the Elizabethan era to publicly display the blood-soaked marriage sheets that were used on the night of the consummation to prove that the husband had married a virgin. So within this, what we have is this constant reminder of the sense that what's going on in the background of this scene is that Othello and Desdemona are sleeping with each other, and Iago is absolutely obsessed with this. And we see this then fitting into the understanding of this scene as a sort of metaphorical charivari. That there's some great pleasure that these Venetians gain from disrupting the consummation of the marriage. And that makes sense in terms of the wider plot of this play, in that the sexual anxiety that I think that ensues and that is a consequence of this disruption and this delayed gratification on Othello's part is what ultimately drives Iago's ability to manipulate him. It allows Iago to convince him that he is sexually inadequate and that therefore she would be much more likely to take an interest in someone like Michael Cassio. Clearly what we see in these lines, and this is another layer of irony, is that that's absolutely not the case. Cassio here is a kind of prudish, naive, courtly figure who shows a great level of discomfort, I would say, with this type of sexual discussion. Moving on from this, question 4 says, how do Cassio's lines reveal his anxiety about disrepute and damnation despite his intoxication? So between these lines and these ones, not very many, we're up to roughly line 100 here, Cassio's got drunk. And we know that he on the page, freely admits that he can't drink. He can't hold his ale or his wine, as is the case here. And you can hear this in these lines. He says, no, for I hold him to be unworthy of his place that does those things. Well, God's above all, and there be souls must be saved, and there be souls must not be saved. Iago says, it's true, good lieutenant. And for mine own part, and no offence to the general, nor any man of quality, I hope to be saved. And these lines are quite tangential. They don't really follow logically from the drinking songs that Iago has them singing, King Stephen and a worthy peer. These drinking songs are really about Iago's class anxieties, I think, more than anything. this issue shows this enormous sense of paranoia that Cassio has, and it seems to be as if his anxiety about drinking and his paranoia about not, behaving in a way that is commensurate with his public role is filtering through here in this drunken babble. It's meant to sound repetitive, as the way people do when they've been drinking too heavily. It's meant to sound slightly tangential, and Iago realizes this, and this is why he's taking great pleasure in the act here. It's true, good lieutenant. He is delighted with the fact that he's managed to get Cassio completely hammered after having one glass of red wine. So here, I hold him to be worthy of his place that does those things. What? We don't know at this point. Well, God's above all, and there be souls must be saved, and there be souls must not be saved. He's got this great sense of anxiety about the extent of his sinfulness. And really, the only sinful action that he's carried out so far, ostensibly, is his drinking, unless we choose these lines as an admission of guilt for his apparent sexual attraction to Desdemona that Iago perhaps takes advantage of. But I think really you want to read these lines as a sort of drunken tangential diversion. And here, I hope to be saved. He's most interested in his own sort of spiritual redemption. So what this seems to be revealing to us is a quite honest, if slightly prudish, character whose, I guess, his public role is connected really clearly and directly to his sense of religious morality. Moving on, question 5. How does Iago's manipulation of Montano here take advantage of his sense of duty and responsibility? Now, Iago speaks to Montano. He's got Cassio hammered, and now he's got the governor of Cyprus worried about the fact that Cassio is the one in charge of the island. He's Othello's proxy on the island. And he says to Montano, "You see this fellow that has gone before. He is a soldier fit to stand by Caesar and give direction. But do see his vice. 'Tis to his virtue a just equinox. So it is an equal balance to his virtue, this vice that he has. And it's his alcoholism is what he's trying to imply here. The one as long as the other. He is just as vice riddled through his alcoholism as he is virtuous through his effectiveness as a soldier. And here he says, 'Tis pity of him. I fear the trust Othello puts in him on some odd time of his infirmity will shake this island.'" And here, what he seems to be manipulating is Montano's sense of duty and responsibility. Montano has an enormous sense of civic responsibility to the people of Cyprus. And Iago here manages to abuse the position of trust that Othello puts in him. So their sense of trust and their mutual esteem for each other and the virtue that is underpinning this is called into question. But also here will shake this island. Montano's ultimate responsibility is to the people of Cyprus. But once again, he takes advantage of the commitment of others to abstractions such as virtue and nobility and responsibility in order to manipulate them. So he manipulates Montano with his sense of public responsibility and civic responsibility to the people of Cyprus, as you can see from this immediate question. But as he often does, he panics. 'Tis evermore the prologue to his sleep. He's always getting drunk before he goes to sleep. Now, next question. How do Montano's lines offer a warning about abstractions like virtue and reputation? Which is ironic because he's just being manipulated in his commitment to an abstraction. Montano says, "It were well the general were put in mind of it. We should tell Othello that he has entrusted the governorship of Cyprus to a drunken fool. Perhaps he sees it not, or his good nature prizes the virtue that appears in Cassio and looks not on his evils." And this is a prescription that I think perhaps Iago would agree with. That the virtue that appears in Cassio, his virtuous adherence to rank and his effectiveness as a soldier, prevents Othello from seeing his evil. And he's quite right. And again, the beautiful irony of this is precisely what Othello does with Iago. He sees a virtue in Iago that is in fact not there and doesn't look at his evils until it's far too late. So Montano's prescription here warns us about abstractions like virtue once again. You cannot afford to see virtue as a mask for the inadequacies and the vices and the cynical reality of human behaviour.